300 years were added to the calendar, and no one noticed. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a whispered truth buried so deep in the folds of power, it echoes like a curse. Imagine this. The year is not 2025, it's 1725. What you know as history may be fiction, a fabricated narrative, forged to legitimize empires and sanctify thrones. What if time itself was edited like a manuscript? A priest's hand, dipped in ink, erased the centuries and rewrote the age of man. In the shadows of medieval cathedrals, behind the marble altars and candlelit Latin chants, a silent war was waged. Not with swords, but with calendars. 1,000 years ago, the monks didn't just copy texts, they curated reality. The Gregorian calendar you trust, it may be a mask. What if Charlemagne never lived? What if the Dark Ages were never dark? Because they never existed. This isn't about dates, it's about control, of memory, of identity, of truth. Tonight, I'm not here to tell you a bedtime story. I'm here to awaken you to the possibility that you were born inside a lie. One stretched across centuries, one so vast and so sacred, that questioning it once meant death. Now, it means transformation. Keep watching, because the moment you hear what comes next, you'll never look at history, or time, the same way again. They called it the Dark Ages, as if a fog had swallowed the intellect of an entire continent. But darkness isn't the absence of light. It's the deliberate removal of it. For over 300 years, Europe appears to have slept. No wars worth remembering, no inventions, no cultural upheaval. 1,000 cathedrals rose, yet no new philosophies bloomed. Doesn't that seem unnatural? And yet we accepted it. We were taught to. But here's the forbidden truth. Some historians, like Heribert, propose that the years 614 to 911 AD were fabricated, inserted into the timeline by those who controlled both pen and pulpit. Why? Power? Political legitimacy? Divine prophecy? If time could be bent, then destiny could be manufactured. Otto III, ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, had every reason to position his reign at the cusp of the millennium, to appear as the divinely chosen king of the year 1000. But what if the year wasn't T1000? What if it was 700? He needed those missing centuries to exist, and the Vatican, with its unrivaled control of records, scholars, and scripture, provided the perfect machinery for historical manipulation. Every monastery became a factory of memory, every monk a silent editor of time. You were told the Roman Empire collapsed in 476. But then, what filled the next 400 years? Why do written records suddenly grow thin, contradictory, suspiciously recycled? Why do Charlemagne's deeds echo those of Constantine, almost word for word, name for name, law for law? Patterns, once dismissed as coincidence, now scream forgery. You weren't taught history. You were taught obedience to a narrative, and that narrative may be hiding a terrifying truth. We are not who we think we are. We are sons of an edited age, raised in a simulation of memory. Time is not sacred, it is scripted, and the further we dig, the more bones we find, not of the dead, but of buried truths. Stay with me, the descent has only begun. Why were the brightest minds silenced? Why did the architecture of Rome vanish into obscurity, only to suddenly reappear during the Renaissance, as if rediscovered rather than evolved? Open your eyes. What if there was no rediscovery, only revelation of what had been deliberately hidden? The Renaissance wasn't a rebirth, it was a slow unsealing of knowledge long held hostage. The monks didn't lose history, they buried it, under stone, under doctrine, under fear. In the so-called Dark Ages, literacy became a sacred privilege, hoarded by the church. Only the clergy could read, only they had access to the ancient manuscripts. But even they didn't read the originals. They read translations, rewritings in ecclesiastical Latin, a language no citizen could speak, a language designed not for communication, but for containment. The wisdom of Aristotle, Galen, Ptolemy, filtered, trimmed, rebranded through a Christian lens. Any text that contradicted doctrine was labeled pagan, heretical, dangerous. And danger was dealt with by fire. The greatest library of the ancient world burned in Alexandria, but in Europe, the burnings were slower, quieter, more surgical, one manuscript at a time. What remained was not truth, but permission. This was not ignorance. This was strategy. A world stripped of its memory is easier to rule, and in that vacuum of mind, the church emerged as not just spiritual authority, but temporal master. When they erased time, they didn't just rewrite history, they rewrote reality. And you were born into that edited version, into a civilization built atop deleted centuries, and you never questioned it, because no one told you it was possible, until now. But listen closely. This rabbit hole has no bottom. You're not being entertained, you're being initiated. By the end of this, you'll no longer just know something forbidden, you'll be someone transformed by it. If 3 centuries were fabricated, who benefited most from the lie? To answer that, you must look beyond the surface, beyond emperors and kings. Their power was visible, measurable, but true control, true empire, is invisible. It operates in symbols, in calendars, in the collective story of time itself. That's what Otto III understood, that's what Pope Sylvester II engineered, and that's what the Vatican never had to confess. Around the year 1000 AD, a moment perfectly symbolic, perfectly divine, Otto Sylvester and their scribes aligned the calendar with prophecy, not reality. They inserted phantom time, an illusion of history, to make it seem as if they were ruling at the sacred dawn of a new millennium. The birth of the Holy Roman Empire wasn't just a political event, it was a spell, a timeline spell, because when you control the beginning, you control the narrative. You crown yourself not as ruler of land, but of destiny. And if Charlemagne, their predecessor, never actually lived, or was a copy of Constantine, as some suspect, then what are we left with? A dynasty built on fiction, wielding doctrine like a sword, erasing memory like ash. But it gets darker, because this wasn't just about ego, it was about obedience. You see, when history is manipulated, the people become disconnected from their past, and a man who doesn't know where he comes from will follow any voice that tells him who he is. That's the core of psychological control. That's the machine beneath the myth. And that machine, this unholy alliance of monarchy, church, and time, didn't stop in the Middle Ages. It evolved into schooling systems that teach state-approved versions of history, into national identities that rise from half-truths and hollow pride, into religious narratives used not to liberate souls, but to program them. Ask yourself this: what if your entire understanding of the past was written to shape your obedience in the present? You are not just living in the echo of forgotten centuries, you are living in the product of their silence. And unless you choose to listen deeper, to hear what was buried under ink and dust, you will remain in the prison they built. A prison without bars, a calendar without truth, a name without origin. Now, are you still with me? Or did the illusion already claim you? Now we come to the heart of the illusion, the chronology itself. You see, time is not neutral. Time is the most powerful weapon ever devised, because if you control the measurement of years, you control the rise and fall of empires, the legitimacy of rulers, and the collective memory of humanity. Enter the Julian and later Gregorian calendars, reforms that weren't just clerical corrections. They were surgical edits to the timeline of the world. In the 16th century, Pope Gregory XIII adjusted the calendar by skipping 10 full days. October 4th became October 15th, just like that. But what if that was not the first adjustment? What if that was just a cleanup, a rebalancing, after the real damage had already been done? According to the phantom time hypothesis, the original wound was struck around 1000 AD, when 297 years were artificially inserted. If that's true, then we are not living in 2025. We are living in the 1700s. And that means everything you know about the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, all of it may have occurred much closer together, or out of sync entirely. Whole lineages of kings and popes may be duplicated, fabricated, or condensed. Archaeological gaps suddenly make sense. Coinage bearing the same emperors appear 3 centuries apart. Suspicious buildings with identical architectural styles, supposedly separated by centuries, appear side by side. Suspicious and astronomical records. Oh, they scream the truth. Eclipse records from ancient sources do not align with our current calendar, but rather than rewrite history, scholars have tortured the data to fit the official narrative, because to admit the timeline is broken is to admit that everything is. And here's where it gets even darker. The Vatican didn't just sit atop the timeline, it sat atop the archives, the secret archives, thousands of years of documents, letters, decrees, ancient maps, and possibly forbidden histories, sealed away behind Vatican walls, not for preservation, but for control. You will never be permitted to browse them. You will never be allowed to question them, because you were never meant to know them. Think carefully now. Why would any institution need a vault of knowledge that no one is allowed to see? Who benefits from a history only they can read? You already know the answer. But knowing is not enough. Soon, I'll ask you to speak it, not to me, to yourself. What if time itself is a weaponized narrative, not just a sequence of moments ticking forward, but a sculpted reality, where your entire perception of past, present, and future has been engineered? Because if you accept the lie of the calendar, you accept the lie of power. You accept that authority has always looked the way it looks now, that empires rose when they were meant to, that prophecies were fulfilled when they were foretold. But if 300 years were forged, then everything anchored to those years, every king crowned, every war justified, every papal decree, is a shadow play, a simulation of history, and the master puppeteers, men in robes, cloaked not just in religion, but in the ancient science of psychological control. They didn't just own books, they controlled belief. You see, belief is the original technology. If I can make you believe something happened, it's as good as having happened. And when belief is spread across millions, across generations, it becomes indistinguishable from truth. This is why they silenced the pagans, why they burned heretics, why they erased entire languages from the script of history. Because alternative voices fracture belief, and fractured belief breeds free minds. Free minds cannot be ruled, so they rewrote the past to chain the future. You were taught to see the Dark Ages as a cultural blackout, but what if it was a blackout by design? A period emptied out to insert false rulers, fabricate continuity, and hide a reorganization of power so massive that even now, most historians dare not touch it. Tell me, do you think it is a coincidence that the era of supposed darkness ends exactly when the Vatican becomes untouchable? That as soon as the fog lifts, the Church emerges fully formed, landowning, militarized, and divine by historical decree? That doesn't just happen. That's manufactured destiny, and if you're beginning to feel your grip on official history weaken, the forgotten underbelly of monasteries and imperial archives, where time was not observed, but crafted. You've heard of monks copying manuscripts but what you weren't told is that these were not neutral scribes. They were ideologically trained agents, soldiers of doctrine armed with quills instead of swords. Their mission, as if reality could be edited like a manuscript, to reshape memory, not preserve it. When they copied Roman or Greek texts, they didn't just transcribe, they redacted, rewrote, reassigned. Meaning, imagine a page of Cicero stripped of politics, Aristotle, neutered of natural philosophy, Pythagoras, geometry reinterpreted not as logic, but as proof of divine order. Truth wasn't preserved. It was reverse engineered to support the Church's claim that knowledge must flow through them alone. And what they didn't like, burned. What they couldn't control, vanished. Now, ask yourself this. How can we trust any chronology born from such manipulation? The Julian calendar, declared inaccurate, conveniently gave way to the Gregorian, a Vatican product. In 1582, 11 days were simply deleted, erased from existence. Imagine the psychological power required to tell an entire continent, today is not what you think. What else might have been inserted, removed, or shifted while the world slept? Science, law, history, religion. They all depend on time to function. If time is false, everything collapses. If the phantom time theory is even partly true, if 614 to 911 AD never happened, then your very position on the timeline is floating on a lie. Your birth year, your nation's founding, your concept of ancient and modern, it's all fiction built on a forged chronology. Yesterday was a lie. That is not astronomy. That is social engineering at a planetary scale. But the real scandal lies in how we responded. We accepted it, adjusted, and moved forward, as if time had always been flexible. Now, connect the dots. That's the secret. Once time is corrupted, all truth becomes negotiable. Beneath the polite surface of academic timelines lies a haunting pattern. Duplication, echoes of emperors, repeated wars, and twin achievements scattered like fingerprints across centuries that shouldn't overlap. But his entire biography reads like a dim reflection of Constantine the Great, down to military conquests, legal reforms, and even religious alignment. You are not looking at two men separated by time. You are looking at a photocopy. Alter the names, tweak the dates, and a recycled legend becomes accepted truth. Who benefits from this? The Holy Roman Empire. Places where archaeological layers are missing, where documents contradict themselves, where clocks and calendars disagree across regions that supposedly shared civilization. The truth is jagged. The timeline bleeds. By anchoring Charlemagne to a divine lineage, they invented legitimacy. By fabricating a past, they purchased a future. Scholars call them coincidences. But how many coincidences does it take before you recognize a blueprint? Charlemagne, the father of Europe, crowned in 808. It's about a mindset forced upon humanity to believe the past is settled, sacred, and closed to scrutiny. But once you realize history has editors, gatekeepers with motives, stop being a reader and become an interrogator. You stop memorizing dates and start demanding proof. Ask yourself this: if entire centuries were created to justify power, what else have you swallowed that was never meant to be questioned? This is not just about years that didn't happen. And what do you find when you do? Gaps, dead zones. Now consider this. From 614 to 911 AD, Europe went silent. While Asia thrived, while Islamic science reached unprecedented heights, Europe left behind almost nothing. No architecture, no innovation, no literature that didn't pass through a priest's pen. Does that sound like a dormant continent, or one frozen in place, waiting for time to be invented around it? The deeper you dig, the more unsettling the silence becomes. From 614 to 911 AD, the historical record isn't just thin, it's haunted. Europe, the cradle of philosophical giants and imperial ambition, suddenly forgets how to write, how to build, how to speak its own name. Centuries pass, yet cities do not grow, languages do not evolve. Entire generations vanish into parchment dust, and no one seems to notice. But silence is never accidental. It is constructed, engineered. Consider the Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 45 BC. It was designed with astronomical precision, yet by the time Pope Gregory XIII corrected it in 1582 with the Gregorian reform, the calendar was off by 10 days, not 13 as it should have been if 1,627 years had truly passed. And what if the world ended once already, and you were born into the reboot? The discrepancy aligns perfectly with the phantom time theorists' missing centuries, suggesting they were never lived, just inserted. Heribert had the technical mind to manipulate chronologies, and the Vatican possessed the ultimate weapon, the unquestioning faith of millions. And who would do such a thing? Controlling time itself meant controlling memory, identity, and meaning. If you can define the past, you shape the present. And if you own the present, you build the future. 3 names surfaced like bones in a shallow grave. Otto III, Holy Roman Emperor with dreams of divine timing. His close ally, the scholar monk Heribert of Otto, who would later become Pope Sylvester II, a man deeply immersed in occult knowledge, said to have studied forbidden sciences in Muslim Spain. And the Vatican, the timeless seat of power that has rewritten dogma, crowned kings, and dictated truth itself. Together, they held both motive and means. Otto desired to rule in the year 1000, a number soaked in apocalyptic symbolism and divine legitimacy. Through forged documents, falsified charters, and revised histories, they could reshape the past without lifting a sword. In the age before mass printing or public records, a new date carved into a manuscript was law, and when no one outside the church could read it, who would argue? But here is the darkest truth. They weren't just lying to the people. They were remaking the people. So ask yourself, when you celebrate a millennium, whose clock are you really following? You wake up in a world meticulously scripted, its past fabricated, its future predicted, and you, unknowingly, play a role in a timeline you never consented to. This isn't fiction. This is the hidden mechanism of the phantom time. Not just missing years, but an engineered mythology. Historians place his reign in the late 8th and early 9th centuries, but scratch beneath the surface and things fall apart. His coronation, the similarities aren't just academic. They're architectural. 2 men, 2 eras, or 1 man, renamed and recycled, only documented centuries after it allegedly occurred. His grand empire. Many coins attributed to the early medieval period bear inscriptions that are nearly identical to Roman examples, as if the minters were copying artifacts from a museum. not striking new metal for a living empire, mapped suspiciously like Rome's, as if someone needed a heroic figure to bridge the fabricated centuries, weaponized to enslave the mind. A path where secular wisdom thrived, a path that was abruptly cut, deleted, overwritten. And what we live in now is not the natural course of human development, but the curated garden of an elite class that feared what free minds might grow. Let's look closer at Charlemagne, the so-called father of Europe. Now compare Charlemagne to Constantine the Great. Both centralized power, both aligned with religion to validate rule, both restructured Europe's political skeleton. Even coinage, one of the most consistent tools of archaeological dating, becomes ambiguous. This isn't just error, it's orchestration. But here is the question that truly fractures reality. What if they weren't just rewriting history to elevate a ruler? They manufactured reality. Every birthday you've ever celebrated, every date you've memorized, every war, every treaty may be arranged like books on a shelf that was built to hide the truth, not reveal it, but to erase a rival timeline entirely. What if Europe, in some parallel but forgotten trajectory, had once taken a different path, a path where science advanced faster? By controlling the calendar, they didn't just claim authority. They say the victors write history, but what if the calendar itself is the victory? Think of time not as a passive backdrop, but as a forged weapon. Imagine the calendar being edited like a script, not to tell you what happened, but to erase what they didn't want remembered, and filled with synthetic kings. Then what else could be manufactured? National identities, religious legacies, bloodlines, the illusion of divine right. This is the essence of phantom time. Not just 300 missing years, but 300 engineered illusions that serve the architects of modern control. Let's name them again, not as men, but as mechanisms. Otto III, Holy Roman Emperor, obsessed with prophecy, needing his reign to align with the year 1000, a symbolic number of divine rebirth. Pope Sylvester II, not just a cleric, but a mathematician and astrologer who understood the psychology of prophecy and numbers. And the Vatican, the timeless guardian of archives too deep for daylight. These were not conspirators scribbling in the dark. These were engineers of chronology. We rechained to a number that may have been fabricated to align man with myth, to center Christ, not just spiritually, but to turn belief into chronology, and from chronology into law, and from law into slavery. They didn't burn all the books, they rewrote the margins. And what followed? A 1,000-year architecture of obedience. If time itself could be shifted, compressed, but the implications grow deeper still. Consider this. We are taught to live by the Gregorian calendar, a system created by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582, a system that corrected the Julian calendar to align the but why the rush to fix time? Why was Easter, of all things, the benchmark? Could it be that even our measurements of reality had to be warped to support the lie? Ask yourself, what year is it really? The Chinese have a different count. The Hebrew calendar places us in the 6000s. The Islamic world lives by yet another measure, but the Western world, you've heard the whisper. Now, hear the scream buried beneath centuries of silence. The phantom time theory isn't just about missing years. It's about missing knowledge, missing empires, and missing minds. What if the real danger wasn't that 614 to 911 AD never existed? An era where inventors, scribes, and scientists began to unlock truths too early. Truths that would have shattered the grip of the church, disrupted monarchies, and dismantled the myth of divine right. What if the missing centuries held not barbarism, but brilliance, not darkness, but illumination? But that something or someone existed, that time who threatened the very structure of the power pyramid we now live under. Everywhere you look, there are footprints of a hidden chapter, a missing pulse in the heartbeat of history. The truth isn't taught, it's manufactured, edited, and distributed like a product. Your entire understanding of who you are, your culture, your past, your place in the grand story is based on a timeline that may have been intentionally falsified to domesticate your imagination. And you feel it, don't you? That something is off. Imagine an age of forbidden knowledge, swept away like sand in a storm. And now imagine what they had to do to bury it. Because once you doubt the year, you begin to doubt the author. And when the author is exposed, be it emperor, pope, or hidden order, the entire narrative collapses. Libraries burned, artifacts misdated, dynasties fabricated, bones mislabeled, calendars rewritten to seal the vault. That vault is time itself, but the cracks are showing. Historians can't reconcile glaring contradictions. Buildings appear centuries too advanced. Languages evolve too quickly. Technologies seem to leapfrog logic, because this deception isn't passive. It's aggressive. It's enforced through textbooks, standardized testing, televised documentaries, and digital encyclopedias. Now, pause. What happens when a lie this large begins to unravel? When people reject the false calendar, the power structures depending on it tremble. The question isn't whether time was stolen. The question is, why? What were we not meant to know? Who were we not meant to become? If the past is a prison, then truth is the key, and you're holding it now. Still here. Then you've already stepped beyond the veil, and there's no turning back. Now that you know time itself may be manipulated, ask yourself this: what else do they control that you mistake for natural? The calendar was just the beginning. Time is not a neutral stream. It's a system, a grid, a cage of perception. If they can rearrange centuries without us noticing, what makes you think they haven't already rewritten the present? The phantom time theory is not a standalone hoax or a quirky historical debate. It's the blueprint of an operating system, the architecture of control. What'll you do? Insert false years, erase real events, and suddenly kings appear ordained, nations appear ancient, and the common man appears powerless. Why do Renaissance geniuses appear centuries after Rome, as if history paused and resumed like a stage play? Because that's exactly what happened. To stitch a seamless story where there was once rebellion, rupture, and revolution, the biggest lie wasn't in what they told you. It was in what they made you forget, reclaiming the true tempo of your civilization and your soul. Because if they can steal 300 years, they can steal 30 more. And if you do nothing, they will. And when they ask you why you no longer trust the official story, tell them, because I've seen the erased centuries, and I will not let them erase me. The curtain closed. The script was written. Then they drew the veil again. When you tamper with time, you tamper with identity, destiny, and divinity. Why do you think so many of history's brightest moments seem to emerge out of nowhere? And behind that curtain, a hidden council of knowledge keepers, not scholars, but engineers of memory. Their task, to manufacture continuity. But now that you remember, this is not just about exposing a lie. It's about deprogramming your timeline. Men of awareness, of fire, of discipline, rise from the fog. Don't just consume truth. Carry it. Speak it in the face of ridicule. Protect it like a relic from a shattered temple. They've hidden the past, but now, you're the future they feared.